Hi, hello, and welcome on in for another weekly episode of Cooking with Rambo. This week we are making a chicken parm, and our recipe this week is actually courtesy of Giant Food Stores. Not providing me with the recipe per se, but providing me with a wonderful meal deal that allowed me to get everything I needed in order to make this for y'all. I did have some of the items at home already, such as the flour and the EVOO, the eggs, the seasoning and such that I'm going to use, as well as the extra Parmesan cheese that I'm going to be putting into my breading. But Giant had a wonderful deal where you bought a thing of the chicken breast, and you could choose any weight of the chicken breasts, and then you would get a spaghetti box, you would get the container of breadcrumbs, you'd get the sliced Parmesan cheese, and you would also get the gravy all free of charge. So it was a really nice, easy meal prep that I was able to purchase, and we're going to go ahead and make that today. So for anyone who has never made a chicken parm before, I will be attaching a recipe down in the info of this video for you. But I'm not actually following a recipe because this is another one of those wonderful things that my dad actually taught me when I was growing up. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear some of the space here. That way we can start by cutting our chicken cutlets in half. I do know that when my dad makes chicken parm, he prefers to split open the chicken breasts and then flatten them out and do them that way. But I wanted to make sure I could get enough meals out of this for the week because I like to meal prep. So I just cut them in half instead of flattening them out and opening them up. You do them whichever way you prefer. If you're just making them for dinner and you just need 5, go ahead and flatten them out. If you're like me and you want to get the most out of it, you can go ahead and you can just slice them in half. That way they're a little bit thinner. I thought they were nice just cutting them in half. Before I'm getting into doing the cutting of the chicken breast though, I'm actually going to be pouring some of my dry ingredients out into the bowls. So I already have the purple bowl with flour in it. And then this bowl here has breadcrumbs. I am using the Italian style breadcrumbs rather than the plain style. And I'm just adding in Parmigiani Romani myself. If you don't want that extra cheese in the breading, then by all means leave the Parmigiani Romani out. If you'd rather use regular Parmesan cheese instead of Parmigiani Romani, that's completely up to you. But I wanted it mixed in, and I'm going ahead and I'm using a fork to make sure that that powdered cheese is mixed into my breadcrumbs real nice. Again, you, do as you see fit. I ended up deciding to pour the rest of the cheese in here, and I probably should have added a little bit more breadcrumbs because I ended up needing some more at the end of this video. But you live and you learn. I tried not to put too much into these bowls because I knew that I couldn't put it back because it would be cross-contamination. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that anything you don't use out of these bowls, because it is going to be touching raw chicken, you cannot save. You're going to throw it away. If you try and save this, you're going to have mold growing in it, you're going to make yourself sick, so just don't. Throw it away. You don't want it, you don't need it, okay? You can get some more breadcrumbs for like $2. You're fine. So I've got the black bowl is the breadcrumbs and cheese, the purple bowl is the flour, and then I've got some eggs here, and I'm going to be real fancy for a second and crack it open with one hand. Look at me go! I'm so cool! And I believe I'm using 3 eggs, but I also vaguely remember having to add an extra egg at the end of the recipe because, again, I just used too little. So you do you. Estimate. It's better to have too little than too much, though, because you don't want to have too little. Or you don't want to have too much because you'll waste it. So I guess I only used 2 here, but I'm scrambling it up. And I'm leaving these bowls in the order that the chicken is going to go through them. So after I actually go through the process of cutting the chicken cutlets in half, I'm going to be dipping them into the flour and coating it completely in the flour and then running that through the egg wash, and then that would then get dipped into breadcrumbs. So I'm leaving them in the order that I need them, and I'm also just setting the fork off to the side, not in the sink, but on the sink. That way I have access to it later for when I end up needing to use it to scramble some more eggs. But as always, make sure you're washing your hands beforehand. I already did. Please believe me. And so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to open this up. I did have a paper towel underneath it because it was a little bit juicy. But that's okay. So I'm going ahead and I'm getting some more paper towels because, again, it was a little juicy and I don't want the juices all over the place. But I'm just going to go ahead and use my cutting board and a knife that I have off on the side in my little special knife block. and we're going to go ahead and we're just going to cut these in half. So if you look on the bottom, it kind of looked like you could open it up. I chose not to. I'm just literally cutting straight in half. It's okay if you don't cut them perfectly in half and have even half. It's okay if you don't cut all the way through the first time. It's a learning experience. Just make sure that you're being safe and that you're not cutting yourself in the process, because safety first, guys. Safety first. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to do that with all of these pieces and get them all pre-cut in half. And then I'm going to end up putting them right back into that container for now. That way I can go ahead and season them up, because I'm going to pre-season them before I start dipping them to the flour and everything. I like to make sure my food is seasoned. I like seasoning. So what you don't see off to the side there is I actually rinsed out the container real quick just to get rid of all of the chicken juices that were still in the container. And then I'm going to go ahead and lay down a layer of the chicken. It's only about half of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and season it using my everything seasoning, as I like to call it. It is technically in a garlic and pepper container, but I have obviously used that entire container. And now it's whatever seasoning I throw in there and make myself, because I like to buy seasonings in bulk. And so it's a little bit of Italian seasoning, a little bit of basil, a little bit of dried parsley, garlic powder, onion powder, pepper, and the tiniest amount of salt. And so I'm coating one side of the chicken, flipping it over, coating another side, putting another layer, and then coating and flipping and coating again, to make sure that all of the chicken is getting some seasoning on it, because I like, again, to have seasoned food. I don't like my food to be bland. Once I manage to get that seasoned, you're going to have my stove camera pop up in the upper right-hand corner, like you have hopefully seen in the past couple of episodes. And you're going to be able to see me start getting ready to put the chicken into a pan. Now, I am using my slightly bigger organic pan. You can use whatever frying pan you want to use. And then I'm going to end up putting a little bit of the EVOO into the pan as well, because I am going to be using that to fry up the chicken. Now, if you don't like using EVOO and you want to use something else, or you want to do these in an air fryer, or you want to find some other means to make your Parmesan chicken, by all means, go for it. I'm just choosing to do it in the pan. So, in the stove top corner there, you can see I've got the green organic pan. I've got the pot for when I get to making my spaghetti, and then I've also got a cookie sheet, and I did put a cookie cooling rack inside of my cookie sheet, but as always, I completely forgot that I only have one of those cookie cooling rack things to put into my cookie sheets. So I have one pan that's going to use it and one pan that is not going to have that inside of it, and it's just going to sit just in the cookie sheet, which is totally fine. It just helps elevate the chicken parm a little bit. That way it's not going to stick to the cookie sheet itself, but then it's also not going to sit in its own juices and get the breading all soggy. I like to have it lifted a little bit. So either way is totally fine. Y'all do what you have available. I just like to use the cooling rack inside of the cookie sheet when I'm cooking. And then I completely forgot that I needed an extra little pan to warm up my gravy. Now, if you don't want to heat up your gravy beforehand, by all means, you don't have to. But I am going to go ahead and heat up my gravy beforehand. And then I'm going to use that warm gravy to stick on top of the chicken parm eventually, but also that way it's warm to stick onto the pasta before I put the chicken parm onto the pasta itself. So, y'all, again, do you, but I wanted to make sure I had a pot to warm up the gravy in, and it's just going to sit on a low simmer while I'm doing everything, essentially. Now, I've always had the habit instilled in me that you want to get every little bit of sauce out of that jar, so even if I'm just making plain spaghetti sauce, I'm going to go ahead and put the tiniest amount of water into the jar to shake it up and get that extra sauce out of it and put that into the pan. You don't want to use too much water though, otherwise you're going to water down your gravy, so just a little bit of water to rinse out the jar. If you don't want to do that step at all, by all means go ahead and skip it, but I like to make sure that I get the most for my money. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse it out a little bit. And then I am using a flavored spaghetti sauce. It's not just a straight marinara sauce. It's flavored with garlic and herb. But if you want to go ahead and add your own seasonings to the sauce here, you can go ahead and add your own seasonings. If you want to add some more garlic to it, you can add more garlic. If you don't like your sauce as acidic, you can go ahead and add some sugar to cut down on the acid. Do whatever you're accustomed to. I'm just doing what I'm accustomed to. And I usually add my own seasonings into the sauce as well, but I think I skipped it for this week. Don't ask me why, I just did. But there you go, I'm adding the EBOO into my pan, and that is going to be on medium heat for cooking the chicken cutlets, only because I don't want to burn them. I want to get a really nice crisp to it. And so what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to completely cover it in the flour. Make sure you get the sides and everything. You can flip it back and forth a couple of times. Don't be afraid to get a little bit of flour all over the place. It's okay to make a mess, guys. And then once it is completely covered in the flour, I'm shaking off the excess, and then I'm going to go ahead and dip it into the egg wash. And again, I'm flipping it over. That way it is completely covered in that egg wash, because this is what is going to help the breadcrumbs stick to your chicken. And I'm letting the extra drip off, and I'm going to go ahead and completely cover it in the breadcrumbs. Now, I like to push down on the chicken a little bit here to make sure that the breadcrumbs have a really good stick to the chicken. I know there have been times when I've breaded my own chicken or my own pork chops that breading has come right off. So I like to make sure that I push it in there real good and that everything is fully sticking before I go ahead and cook it. And hopefully it'll stay on there. And then you're going to go ahead and you're just going to cook it. Now, I could realistically probably have fit 2 cutlets into this pan at a time, but I wanted to make sure that everything cooked evenly and that the entire cutlet was getting in and being seared nicely. So I just did it one at a time, and I did wash my hands between every single one of these because I kept using my dominant hand, and so I kept going to stir things and not have my hand clean, and it was just the whole thing. So do what you will. If you want to wear gloves, wear gloves. If you want to just cook with your dirty hand after dipping it, by all means. If you want to go ahead and use your non-dominant hand, that way you don't have to wash between, you can do that as well. What I'm going to do, or what you should have seen me show, was my sliced Parmesan cheese. This is what's going to end up going on top of the chicken parm when it goes to bake in the oven. So I'm opening that up, that way I can start preemptively pulling those apart, that way they're ready to be placed on top. These cheese slices were very thick, so a lot of them I ended up cutting them in half, and then only using half of the slice of chicken on the chicken cutlet, but some of them were also just very big pieces of chicken, so I used a whole slice of cheese on it as well. Whatever your preference is, whatever you like, go ahead and do that. Now, I did briefly mention that these are going to end up going into the oven, so you're going to want to make sure your oven is preheating to 350 degrees, or you could do 345 if you really wanted to. I probably wouldn't go much higher than 375. I know I said 345, but I definitely meant 375. The chicken cutlet itself is probably going to cook in this pan for about 3 minutes before you flip it, and then you're going to do another 3 minutes on the other side. Realistically, you're just looking to get that really nice golden brown texture on the breadcrumbing that you added, because since it's going into the oven, it is going to make sure it finishes cooking that meat. So it's okay if it's a little raw after pulling it off of the pan. You just want to make sure you've got that really nice, good, crispy breading to it. While I am waiting for the chicken cutlet to go ahead and cook and sear, I am getting my pot ready for my pasta. So I put in some warm tap water off of my sink, and I added in some salt because I want to make sure that I'm making it so that the water boils at a higher temperature and cooks the pasta a little bit faster. At least that's what I was taught about it. I don't know if that's actually what it does or not. I do know that adding the sodium to the water does mess with the temperature at which it boils, but my brain can never remember exactly why or what we do with it. And so I flipped the chicken cutlet there. You can see it's got that really nice golden texture to it. So that side is completely done, and we're letting the other side sit on it. Every now and again, I'm just going to go into the sauce pot here, and I'm going to stir it to make sure that it's not burning on the bottom and that it's not bubbling too much. Again, you can leave this on a low simmer. It's just to get it a little warm. It's not to actually like cook anything inside of the sauce. What you see me doing here is I'm just pushing the chicken down into the pan a little bit to make sure that the edges are getting nice and crispy as well. If you're confident in your cooking, by all means, you don't have to tap down on it like I'm doing here. I just wanted to make sure that the entire thing was getting a really nice crispiness to it rather than just the center part. And then once I think it is good to go, I'm flipping it over, double checking it, and then it's going to get moved over into the cookie sheet where it's going to rest, and I'm going to start doing another piece of chicken in the pan. You can see throughout this entire video, I'm going to struggle a lot with using the tongs to pick up the chicken. Whatever you're comfortable with doing to move the chicken out of the pan and into the cookie sheet, by all means, you go ahead and you do you. I am going ahead and I am starting to flour, egg wash, and put breadcrumbs onto the next piece of chicken. I'm probably going to end up adding EVOO in between each slice of breaded chicken, but if you have enough left in the pan, you don't have to. Just make sure that you're not putting the chicken in there dry and that you're keeping an eye on your pan while you're getting your chicken ready to go into it. You don't want to have it just overheating without anything in the pan. You could risk damaging your pan, and you can also end up burning your chicken if you don't have the proper stuff in there to actually cook it. So just something to keep an eye on. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be quiet for a lot of this, but I'm going to do 4 of these so that 4 of them fit onto that cookie sheet. Once they're on the cookie sheet and ready to go, and I've got the next piece of chicken in the pan, I am going to add some of the spaghetti sauce onto each of the cutlets, and then I am also going to put the cheese onto the cutlets. I'll check back in with y'all when I am starting that process, just to remind you about the oven process again, and then we'll see how it goes from there. So, unfortunately, I didn't catch that the stovetop camera decided to glitch out here, and you guys are going to miss out on me putting the sauce on the first set of chicken cutlets. But I'm just using a spoon to put some spaghetti sauce onto the chicken cutlets. And then you saw me grab that piece of cheese there. This is when I realized that the camera busted. I'm going ahead, I am folding and ripping the cheese in half. If you want a really nice clean line, by all means you can use the kniff or you can use some skizzers, and you can go ahead and you can cut the cheese that way. I don't care about having that clean edge, especially since this cheese is going to be melting while it's in the oven anyway, but if y'all are perfectionists and y'all want to have a clean cut, by all means go ahead and use something to get that really nice clean cut. And then I'm just putting half of each slice of cheese onto the piece of chicken, and this is going into the oven. Again, the oven temperature should have been preheating to a minimal of 350 degrees Fahrenheit, or you could do 375. I wouldn't personally go any higher than 375, but you can certainly do whatever you are comfortable with. Your oven may have different temperatures depending on whether you're using a gas oven or an electric oven. So you go ahead and you figure out what works best for you. While that set is in the oven and getting all nice and melty, I am placing my second cookie sheet on the stove, ready to go. I can go ahead and move this chicken cutlet over once it's done. That underside was still a little light, but I'm deciding to move it over anyway. This is a very big piece of chicken that's going onto this cookie sheet, by the way. This is one of those pieces that's going to get a whole slice of cheese instead of a half. But I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to keep repeating the process here. And eventually you'll see me go and add the spaghetti into the boiling water. I am waiting for this pot to come to a complete boil before I am adding it in. But I am going to end up putting an entire pound of thin spaghetti into this pot. I am going to break the pasta in half like you have seen me do in my other videos. I'm doing this just so that it's a little bit easier for me to eat while I'm at work rather than having to deal with the full-length noodles. Now, you could technically cut the noodles after they are done cooking using a fork or a knife or some scissors again. I just find it a lot easier to preemptively cut your noodles by hand because while they are rigid when they're uncooked, you can very simply just snap them in half. So I end up putting a little bit into my hand at a time and snapping it in half over the pan. That way, if anything ricochets, it ricochets into the pot itself. But yeah, that's what I'm going to end up doing. You'll see that, and I believe I do enlarge the stovetop camera again. So just hang tight, keep listening to the tunes, and I'll check back in with y'all when you hopefully get to see me actually put the spaghetti sauce onto the chicken cutlets this time. So a quick little friendly reminder that this video is presented to you in real time. So at this point, I have been prepping and cooking these chicken parm cutlets for approximately 45 minutes. I am gonna go ahead and pull out the cookie sheet that we had in the oven prior to this. And I'm gonna show you here that wonderful melty cheese on it. It doesn't look completely melted at this point, but I can tell for sure that it is 100% melted. It just may not look like it to you. I'm gonna set this off to the side to cool a little bit. I am placing it on my my cutting board there. I could have put it directly onto the countertop if I really wanted to, but I have stuff everywhere and I have very limited counter space, so I'm just putting it on the cutting board. And I am gonna go ahead, and the camera is in fact working this time. Thank Jeebus. And we're going to use my little spoon here, and we're gonna scoot out some of that spaghetti sauce, and we're gonna put it on top of the chicken cutlets here. I generally am just putting enough of the sauce on here that it does not spill over the edges. If you want a little bit more gravy on your chicken pieces, by all means, you can add some more. I just know that I don't want it spilling off the edges and going all over the pan. I want it to be contained on the chicken itself. And I'm going to be adding some of the sauce onto the spaghetti before I put the chicken on top of it anyway, so it's okay if there's not quite enough sauce on here. I also don't want that sauce drying out in the oven anyway, so a spoonful is typically enough. I might do a spoon and a half depending on how runny the spaghetti sauce is. But I'm just carefully running this over the chicken here. And then once I've got the spaghetti sauce on each of the pieces of chicken, I'm going to go ahead and add the cheese on top, just like I did with the first cookie sheet pan. And then this is going to go in the oven just like that last one did. I did add in the spaghetti already, as you can see. I don't remember at what point I turned the stove off, but there are a couple ways you can test the spaghetti to see if it's fully cooked. One is to just take out a piece and chew on it and see if it's too al dente for your taste. And for anyone who is not familiar with what the word al dente means, it means that it's a little chewy still. Some people don't like their pasta a little chewy. They like to have it literally fall apart in your mouth when you push it against the roof of your mouth with your tongue. If you're one of those people, go ahead and cook it all that way. If you're like me and you like yours a little bit al dente, you can go ahead and turn it off beforehand. Now, if you're going to leave your spaghetti in the hot water, it's going to continue to cook. So even if you turn the burner off, if the water is hot, the pasta is going to continue to cook and continue to absorb that water and get larger. So if you find that it is just the way you like it and you don't want it continuing to cook, make sure you drain it out of the water. I stopped mine a little bit before it was done. That way it could sit in the water and continue to soak it in and get a little bit bigger without me having to strain it. I definitely have a colander that I could have strained it if I wanted to, but I chose not to. Because I only have 2 cookie sheets, I do have to pull the chicken parm off of this cookie sheet to reuse it. That's just because I have so many chicken pieces here that I'm going to have to cut up and put into my meal prep containers. So I put it onto the cutting board here for now so that I can reuse the cookie sheet, and then eventually I am actually going to cut up those pieces there because it makes it a lot easier to eat at work. But I'll be quiet now. The process is literally the same. I'm just continuing to cook these pieces of chicken in the pan and putting them onto the cookie sheet. And I will catch you guys in a little bit again when we're ready to flip out the cookie sheets again. So at this point, I am down to the last of my chicken pieces. So I'm cleaning up a little bit. That way I have open counter space again to put my Tupperware containers out for the actual meal prepping portion of my cooking. I went ahead and I preemptively flour, egg washed, and breadcrumbed that last piece of chicken to go ahead into the pan. And I'm sure you noticed I ran out of my eggs and my breadcrumbs, so I did have to restock those just a little bit. I had tons and tons of flour though, so that's good. So I ended up getting 12 total portions out of this. I did end up eating 2 of these for dinner this night, which you will see at the very end of the video. I will show you my wonderful little plate of dinner that I had. I skipped lunch and I was super hungry, and the chicken came out absolutely phenomenal. So I ended up eating 2 of the pieces of chicken. But yeah, I made 6 portions for lunches. I may have only made 5. But I think I made 5 or 6 portions, and then any extra chicken that I had got put into its own Tupperware container, and I just set that aside and stored that, and I ate it throughout the week with other things, such as making some, like, chicken Alfredo, or making some mashed potatoes and things like that. But, yeah! We're just waiting for that last piece of chicken to cook, and then I can go ahead and flip out the cookie sheets that are in the oven and sitting on top of the stove again. At this point, my pasta is 100% done. It's completely turned off and it's just sitting in the water. I am setting up my Tupperware containers. The spaghetti sauce is still on a low simmer. That way it stays warm, but it's not boiling over or anything like that. And I am, like I said before, going to go ahead and cut the chicken parm pieces here. That way they are easier to eat at work. But if you're just serving them for dinner, you don't have to cut them like I did. I do know when I went to try and cut these that my breading stayed on, but my Parmesan cheese did not. The cheese decided to try and slide off and go all over the place, so just keep that in mind, I guess. But yeah, I'm gonna be quiet again and let you guys listen to the music while I continue to cook, and I will tune back in just a little bit to talk to you guys some more. I do apologize that y'all are kind of staring at this camera of nothingness for a little while here. I completely forgot that I had enlarged this camera so that you could get a nice close-up of what I was doing with the chicken, and started cutting up the other pieces. So that's what you're missing off to the side. I am going to remember and fix it in just a second so that y'all can actually see what I'm doing. But I wanted to apologize for that. Sometimes I get to be a little bit of an airhead and a little too into my music that I'm listening to while I'm cooking. And so I forgot that the camera wasn't going where it was supposed to. As part of the reason why I wanted to be able to record these on 2 separate OBS portions, that way I could maneuver the cameras later when I was editing. But my laptop just does not like to deal with that, so I unfortunately have to leave them on the same OBS recording portion rather than 2 separate recorded videos. But, yeah. All you're missing is me cutting up that chicken and the cheese not wanting to stay on the chicken as I'm cutting it. So, you'll see in just a second. Just watch. And cue the chicken not staying with the cheese, and the cheese just having a mind of its own. So all I'm doing here is just cutting them once to make the pieces slightly smaller. I definitely could have cut these in half again, that way they were even smaller portions. But I decided that this was trimmed enough for what I was doing. I can use a fork to cut the pieces in half later if I need to. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scoop the pasta into each of these containers. I'm putting about a scoop into each of these containers, just enough so it covers the bottom of the container. If you are someone who likes to stick to a very strict portion size of how much weight of a pasta goes into the containers, by all means, you do you. You go ahead and measure out exact portions. I'm just guesstimating and doing about a scoop or a scoop and a half for each of these containers and doing my best to make them look even while also saving myself a portion for dinner. And once I have the pasta laid out into all of the containers that I'm going to be meal prepping, I'm going to go ahead and put some spaghetti sauce into it as well. And then once the spaghetti sauce is in there, I can go ahead and slide one of these chickens on top of that. And that's all it is. That's all I have to do for the meal prep. I do have my last cookie sheet in the oven at this point in time, and I have the one that we just recently pulled out sitting off on the stovetop, as you can kind of see on the corner there. So I'm just going to keep repeating this process and going through as I prep the rest of these containers. And that's it. That's all you have to do. It took me about an hour to get this done. So if you've got an hour to cook and you want to make something mostly from scratch, I did not obviously make my pasta from scratch because I am not that person. I like my boxed pasta. There's nothing wrong with boxed pasta. But, yeah, I don't think it was too difficult. You can always start with smaller helpings if you are living by yourself and are not meal prepping. You can totally just do like 2 cutlets instead of 8 or 12 like I did. But you do whatever you need and whatever you are comfortable with. There are tons of meal deals that you can do to try and get things cheaper. Making big batches like this and meal prepping does help save a little bit of money, because if you think about what you would spend at a restaurant such as Olive Garden, you would probably end up spending like $16 on a chicken parm meal, and I just made 6 portions at least, not including my dinner and whatever extra pieces of chicken I had, for probably about $20. Now, keep in mind, I did only pay for my chicken, and I got the rest of the stuff here that I needed for free or had it at home already. But a thing of spaghetti costs you about $1. A spaghetti sauce is like $1.50, depending on what brand you're going for. Breadcrumbs are probably going to be $2 there. Your Parmesan cheese slices are probably another like $2.50. I don't usually buy them that way. I usually buy by the pound at the deli, so I'm not super sure on the price of these packages here. But you get all of those, and then you buy whatever weight of chicken that you need. So in my case, I think I ended up having like a 5-pound package of chicken. So it was probably like, I don't know, $16 or $20. I could be completely wrong on that. I am voicing over this like 2 weeks after I made this, okay? I'm sorry. But it saves down on the money because for the price of buying 2 chicken parm meals at a restaurant, I made 6. Plus a plate for dinner, plus extra chicken cutlets to eat later on in the week. So you're definitely saving a lot of money by being able to meal prep like this. So if that's something you're looking to do, is save a little bit of money, maybe consider doing some meal prep. Alrighty, now that we're getting the last bit of spaghetti sauce into all of these containers and onto my dinner plate, I'm gonna go ahead and start putting the chicken into these containers as well. Now, you're going to see me use the knife to scoop up underneath the chicken and put it into the Tupperware container. Please, 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 if you are going to attempt to do this yourself, be extremely careful. I do not need you injuring yourself. I am confident in myself and I take it very slow, sliding it underneath and avoiding my fingers. So if you're not comfortable doing that, use a spatula, use the tongs, whatever it is you need to do. Just please be careful. Please do not injure yourself here. We want spaghetti sauce, not your inner fluids. Thank you. This next part here is me being a little fancy. I have a little basil plant that I keep off by my windowsill in my kitchen and dining area, and he has gotten very tall, and he has a lot of really nice basil leaves on him. So I decided to be very fancy and put some basil leaves on top of my chicken parm here. You do not have to do this. You do not have to eat them when you go to cook it if you don't want to. At this point, it's not really adding flavor into anything because it's not cooked into the spaghetti sauce. It's not cooked into the chicken parm. It just makes it look really nice and fancy, and it has a really nice smell when you do microwave it. So you don't have to put the basil leaves on top. I just want it to be extra. But that's it. I have 6 meals ready to go for the week. I am sealing them up, making sure I'm squishing the extra air out of the containers when I'm putting the lid on. That way they have a really nice, good seal on them, and they're not going to get all gross sitting in my fridge for the week. And yes, these meals will last me all week. I do come home during the week and make myself dinner, but as you can tell, I do also technically have an extra meal because there are 5 days in a week that I work, and there are 6 meals here. So one of these meals will end up getting eaten for dinner, but the rest of the week I will make myself dinner when I get home, and I can make very simplistic single-serve dinners if I want to. And yes, these will last all week in terms of freshness. They are not going to get spoiled in the course of 5 days. I know a lot of people think that you can get tired of eating the same meal every single day, but to be honest with you, if you're eating different things for dinner, it doesn't really matter to me, and I'd rather save that money than have to cook every day or order food every day at work. So that's all I'm doing. And what you're gonna see me do here is cut up this piece for my dinner, and it's gonna go onto my plate, and I'm gonna show you how it looks all fancy with just one cut up piece of chicken on the plate. And then my fat butt is gonna go ahead and add a second piece of chicken to my plate, and that is what I'm gonna end up eating for dinner. Realistically, though, a single serving is probably just one of these pieces of chicken, which is why each of the meal prep containers only had one piece of chicken inside of it. But, yeah, that's it. That's all I did. I stashed away the rest of the chicken in a separate Tupperware container to eat for dinner throughout the week with other foods. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was relatively easy to follow. If there is something else you want me to cook or to show you guys how I make, feel free to leave a comment below the video, and I will consider making a video of me cooking that item later on. If there are some different ethnic cuisines you want me to try making, I have made other cuisines such as bibimbap or japchae, things like that. Feel free to comment those as well. If it's something I've never tried making before, I can totally look up a recipe and give it a try. But I can't promise that it will be the following week's video because I record these videos 2 weeks in advance. But this food was absolutely amazing, and I absolutely love cooking. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and I will catch you guys next week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Catch y'all on the flip side.